Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's time. I mean, it's bittersweet. This episode features our discussion of the series finale of The Bad Batch. But before we dive into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Absolutely. We can be found swimming in our internet tears on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. Oh, wait, that might just be me.
It's going to be a lot of people, but all right. That is the line. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this is our discussion and review of The Cavalry Has Arrived, which is episode 15 of the third and final season of The Bad Batch. I know I said like season 5 a number of times over the past couple of weeks, but that's because I'm also watching the 5th and final season of Discovery. So there you go.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Well, there we are. So this is a full spoiler discussion. So if you haven't seen it, the episode's 50 minutes or so. Go check it out. I don't want to ruin anything. It's totally worth it. And then put this on pause and come back. So, but there's your warning. With that having been said, Jay, go ahead and give us the summary of the finale.
I would be honored. As Clone Force 99 make their way to Tantiss, Omega and the Children of the Vault make their escape. They find their way to the Zillo Beast and release it. In the ensuing rampage, Clone Force 99 makes their way to Tantiss, but they encounter Hemlock's elite commandos and are captured. Echo and Emerie catch up to Omega, and then Emerie takes the other children to safety in a shuttle. Echo and Omega free the clones held prisoner at Tantiss, and then set about rescuing the rest of the Bad Batch. Once freed, the Bad Batch defeat Hemlock's commandos, and then Hemlock himself in a tense standoff on a bridge. After the mission, they return to Pabu to make new lives for themselves. Later in an epilogue, a grown Omega says goodbye to Hunter before leaving Pabu to join the rebellion.
Yeah, there you have it. So what is your overall thought on this one?
Honestly, I am still processing. I feel like I need to watch this like 3 more times, but my first initial reactions are that I definitely needed the tissues for sure. But there was a lot of satisfying parts to this finale, and then there were some other things that left me kind of, don't know why they did it that way. And then other things that were like, really? They did it that way? So, as of course, as always, as we dissect this and talk through it, it will all come to, that discussion point. But overall, I'm very satisfied with the way that this ended. How about you?
Yeah, satisfied, happy, satisfied, content. I watched this thing and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, literally at some points. And I was not expecting them all to make it out of this alive. And I thought we were going to lose somebody on this. I'm glad that didn't happen. The end seemed like the perfect resolution for everybody involved. I was glad that Hunter finally is going to get the rest that he wants, and Crosshair is ready to be done with fighting, and Wrecker's happy to go along with whatever for the most part. So they got what they wanted. And then, as Omega would tell them, it's like, she's ready for this. And so she gets to go off and take pick up the baton, so to speak, and then go on with this fight. I'm really happy. I suppose as we discuss this, I might find some things to dissect and pick on it. Does it absolutely blow me away? Probably not. But I was content. I was happy. I was satisfied with this when it was over. And I'm sorry to see that it's over, but I found the ending to be very fitting. So I'm not sure that I really could ask for anything more.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm very glad that we didn't lose any of our beloved in this particular episode. And like you, I thought for sure there was going to be some moments, and there was some points where I gasped, right out loud, and put the hand over the mouth and almost put my hands over my eyes, kind of a thing, just wondering where it was all going to go. But one thing I did appreciate is that there was enough of kind of a hole in the fabric, if you will, to be able to weave in some new types of storylines perhaps later on. And so I'm glad for that.
Yeah. So no, there's a lot of potential here for stories going forward, and we'll get into that here. But I've got a number of things we'll talk about. So, as I just said a moment ago, none of the Bad Batch died here. What were your expectations for that when coming into the episode, and how surprised were you that they all lived, if at all?
Oh, well, I was hoping that we would get them all out alive, but especially after I had my friends, Cap and Star, who, of course, are Hunter and Crosshair in their cosplay. They were here a couple of weekends ago, and they were both saying, "Oh, they're all going to die. We just know they're all going to die." And so I was kind of sort of expecting more of a Rogue One sort of an ending where, it was kind of one of those things where everyone sacrificed themselves for the cause. And there were definitely some points where, like, I thought Wrecker was definitely a goner at one point. And then, of course, when Crosshair lost his hand, that was one of the big points where I just, gasped kind of thing. And when they brought them in on those gurneys into Tantiss after they were captured, I literally I paused it and tried to rewind to the exact, frames, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, like are they knocked out? Are they dead? Are they, like, what's going on here?" So, yeah, like you with being on the edge of my seat, I was definitely on the edge of my seat. I was kind of surprised, but then again, not, because seeing as how this is supposed to be, a kid's show, I thought, well, maybe that's kind of why. But then, of course, the storyteller in me thought, no, there's got to be a reason why there's going to be perhaps more stories coming out of this. So I was very happy. But what about you?
Well, early on, Crosshair makes that comment to Hunter and Wrecker, when Wrecker was carrying some injuries around that were slowing him down. It's like Crosshair said, "I'm going to go in, you two find a communications array and contact Rex." And from there, I kept expecting Crosshair to make some sacrifice, especially since he had made a comment about, not giving up on Omega earlier. And so if anyone was going to go, he was number one on me. Number two was Echo, just because he kind of got separated from everybody else. And
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the clone with 9 lives. It's Echo.
Yeah, it's so true.
And so, there was, he was potentially on my list, or, they were all going to get wiped out, and, in service to saving Omega and giving her and the other clones there and these other kids, a chance at freedom and stuff like that. But I'm thrilled that they all made it out of there. And, we don't necessarily need any more adventures for the Bad Batch, because they've been set up for this retirement and for this life of peace. When we get to the end, Omega asks Hunter, like, "What's everyone going to do now?" And then Hunter's like, responds, "That's the beauty of it. Whatever we want, we get to make a choice now." When they didn't have that option before,
Right.
they were stuck in service to the Republic during the Clone Wars, and then having to work as mercenaries to make ends meet for a while after that. And then just when they started to think they could settle in at Pabu, that's when the Empire invaded. And now that Hemlock's gone, they don't even have to worry about that anymore. So,
So true. Yeah. So a couple things just backstepping really quickly. You were talking about, Crosshair almost seeming like he was going to sacrifice himself. And he even said Plan 99. And they were, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So, my thought went back to the original clone 99 who sacrificed himself for his brothers, you know?
yeah.
So there was that. But did it surprise you at all that they did go back to Pabu, as much as I think it was a fitting place for them to be? I mean, the Empire already sought them out once there for them. So I thought, oh, is that kind of hiding in plain sight, thinking that they wouldn't go back to an obvious place where they might reestablish themselves?
See, I actually think that was explained pretty well, because we'll get to this turn of events, but Nala Se told Omega that her research has to be destroyed and Hemlock essentially has to die in order for Omega to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else knows why Omega is important, or that even she's a thing. And so there really is no reason for the Empire to go back to Pabu unless they want to subjugate it for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Okay.
Tarkin shuts this whole thing down at the end.
Yeah.
And, he diverts all the funding from what Hemlock was doing to Project Stardust, which
Right.
was so cool.
Oh, I know.
But so it works for me simply because Hemlock is the only one that was interested in going to Pabu to get the clones in the first place. And once Hemlock is gone, nobody even really knows. And, pretty much all those clones and all those stormtroopers and anyone of any type of authority that knew anything about Pabu, they're wiped out. Scorch, the clone commando, gets shot and killed by the end of this thing. So, anybody that had a role in that is gone.
Okay. So that does clear it up for me then, that it wasn't something that was on like a common record for the Empire. It was more of a Hemlock thing. So yeah, the whole Scorch thing was one of the things that left me a little bit salty, but I don't want to skip around too much, but I want to talk about Tarkin really quickly, just because of the fact that I was surprised that, seeing as how Project Necromancer, as we know, is such a huge thing for Palpatine, and it does come back up in The Mandalorian. And, I feel like that's the kind of the stepping stone, of course, to Exegol, and somehow Palpatine returned. Was it up to Tarkin to divert those funds? I mean, he said it so nonchalantly, or did that come down from the Emperor? Like, oh yeah, we're just going to divert all funds to Project Stardust.
Well, all we can do is speculate, of course, on that. And the way I look at it is that Tarkin knew that Tantiss and what was going on there was important, but Hemlock was shutting him out. But then Tarkin got a report that there was a Zillo beast rampaging around the Tantiss, and therefore a project of extreme importance to the Emperor is at risk. Well, Tarkin is one remove, away from the Chancellor, or from the Emperor there. And so he's like, the Emperor is very concerned about this, so I'm stepping in to see what happened. And when he got there, well, this base has been destroyed. The research is gone. We had money coming here, but it no longer needs to come here. Tarkin probably doesn't know anything else about Project Necromancer elsewhere.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems unlikely, because Vader doesn't find out about it until later.
Right.
And that's in the comics. And even then it's not directly brought up. So, he doesn't even know anything about Exegol. So I think it was within Tarkin's purview to do that, to write this base off as a loss and divert any funding that was scheduled to go to it to his own project, which was also of importance to the Emperor.
So true. And of course, we know that Tarkin was really wanting to get his teeth sunk into Project Stardust and take that away from Krennic. So
yeah. Well, Tarkin was something I want to talk a bit about here. So it is one of my points here. Beyond that, he arrived in a Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Is that the first one?
Did.
Because
I didn't even think of that.
Because up until now, it's always been those the Jedi Star Cruisers. What are they called?
Yeah, the Republic cruisers, like the
they've got another specific name akin to like Star Destroyer, but I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But yeah, and there's two of those with them. as well, but he shows up in a Star Destroyer, and I can't remember if we've seen one in the Bad Batch prior to this,
That's a
because
good
it's
point.
a lot of Republic technology that we see with the V-wing fighters and the Republic shuttles, even the ATTEs. We haven't those that's the turbo tanks and things like that. That's what they've been using. There hasn't been a Star Destroyer here. So, but the other thing is with the mention of Project Stardust. I mean, we're just a year or two after the end of the Clone Wars, and we know from the Rogue One tie-in novel that, and even from Attack of the Clones, how far research into the Death Star went back. But it was a nice reinforcement of this was like Tarkin's obsession even this far back, not just in those couple of years that led up to A New Hope.
Right. So that means that Jin would have just been just a baby at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. All the threads are tying together. But yeah, I didn't even make that connection with the Star Destroyers, honestly. So that was good call.
Oh, thank you. What did you think about the Zillo Beast? I gotta kind of admit, I was expecting a bit more from the Zillo Beast. Now, I'm not particularly disappointed, but Omega freed it. It ate a stormtrooper, swatted a few more away, and then crawled up the shaft, made it out of the hangar, and then rampaged off into the countryside.
Yep. That pretty much sums it up. No, I love how you have in here like the Jurassic Park feel, because it really is the Jurassic Park feel with the
Mhm.
way that it breaks out after Omega frees it. And I love that line too. Was that Echo's handiwork or Omega's? And they look and Wrecker and Hunter look at each other and go, Omega's. That was so cool. So yeah, I was definitely expecting more as well, because it's almost like this little beast just kind of goes off into the sunset by itself. And now what's going to happen from here? I mean, obviously Tantiss is shut down and has been abandoned. So does that just mean that the Zillo beast is just the apex predator on that planet now? And that's just the end of it? I can't imagine that that's going to be the case. I feel like
Well,
it's going to resurface at some point.
yeah, and I mean it's a great point because the Zillo Beast was important to Chancellor Palpatine back in the Clone Wars,
Mhm.
and then it emerged here in the Bad Batch as a clone of that all these years later. So I don't think just because Hemlock's no longer around that the Zillo Beast loses its importance.
Right. That's
So
how
I
I
could,
feel too.
yeah, I feel like it could come up in some project in the future, and I hope it
Mhm.
does. I think those, it's kind of the King Kong or Godzilla of the Star Wars galaxy. It's the kaiju of Star Wars.
No,
Uh,
absolutely.
so I'd love to see more of that.
I
Um,
suppose maybe they just realize, or they think that, well, nothing else is on that planet. So we know where to find it if we need it. And we might as well let it roam free until then.
when Echo and Omega free the clones, they happen to be in the same area as Rampart and Nala Se. And we already talked a bit about how Nala Se told Omega that she's got to destroy the database with all of her research, and Hemlock has to die so that Omega will be safe. But Rampart gets curious about this, picks up a blaster, and follows her to the lab, where he basically decides to learn everything he can about Project Necromancer himself and use it as a bargaining chip to get whatever he wants from the Emperor. What do you think about Rampart's decision?
I was a little surprised, but not. I feel like Rampart is going to use any in that he possibly can to save himself. But, especially after all of the dialogue between he and Crosshair about loyalty and respect and all of that, that he would have been done with the empire. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe his mo was to just steal it from the empire, the research, and use it for his own gains. That's the number one thing that I thought. But I mean, he ended up being a lot slimier than I thought he was going to end up being. I'm not gonna lie, I had
Yeah, I
higher
mean,
hopes.
he had nothing to offer Hemlock or anyone else in the Empire with regards to the Bad Batch in order to get their good graces. So he basically says, this is very interesting. I'm going to use this to, get back, whatever I want from the Emperor. I'm
Mhm.
paraphrasing there, but he specifically mentions the Emperor. in this regard because he sees how important it is. I mean, we still don't have all the details on Project
No.
Necromancer. I mean, we have a vague idea. I mean, we know what the end result of Project Necromancer is, but we don't know what the entire state of the research is at this point, which leads me to believe there's going to be more stories about this, set all
Right.
kinds of different eras between here and the Rise of Skywalker. But so on the one hand, he was set up to have a moment to learn the various lessons of loyalty that the Bad Batch have been trying to impress upon him over the past couple episodes. Hunter basically, or was it Hunter or one of them told him at one point, hey, remember, it was the Empire that turned on you. We're the ones that gave you another chance. And, they bailed him out when the ship was crashing in the prior episode. They've gone out of their way to save his skin a number of times. Now, granted, it was at gunpoint that they had to do things, but they did show some trust in him and gave him those opportunities. So there was an opportunity, kind of like Sid last season, for him to repay that loyalty as opposed to living up to his reputation. But just like Sid, he didn't so much turn on them as he turned on the situation in order to get that. So, yeah, I mean, I was not disappointed in the storytelling. I was disappointed in him when it came down to it. And so when he shot Nala Se and then she happened to have already armed that detonator, well, he got his just desserts in that regard.
Oh, he sure did. And poor Nala Se, but what a noble and fitting end for her, because she knew that was going to be the only way, was to get rid of her research and to be able to allow Omega to have a chance. And she was so willing to just sacrifice herself, as she always has been. And she has this quiet strength about her that just, oh man, that was one of the points where I was like, oh, I didn't think that I would be so upset at Alice's demise, but I was.
Well, and in a way, she got revenge for Kamino.
Oh yeah.
Because she said something along the line, this knowledge is Kaminoan. And when he shoots her, I mean, he's the one that destroyed Dapoka City and bombarded Kamino. And, he's responsible for that. And although she did it essentially in death, when she dropped the armed detonator, she got revenge for her people.
Oh, yeah.
By
So poetic.
destroying the Butcher of Kaminoa. So, yeah, I like the way that turned out. I mean, I'd like to have seen her survive, but a Kaminoan's going to stick out even more than a clone. So I'm not sure her future would have necessarily been. Okay, so we also get the Dark Bad Batch in this episode, the CX clones that Hemlock. Boy, it's hard to say Hemlock and not Rampart, because they're both in there and they've been the villains for so long. Right. But Hemlock, activates these commandos to deal with the Bad Batch, and they really kind of were the Dark Bad Batch, with their different specialties. You had the Bruiser version, you had the Sharpshooter, you had the guy using the swords, and then another just kind of like all-purpose soldier as well. And so, their specialties reminded me of the Bad Batch there. But what did you think of them?
Right. And those swords were so cool, I have to say. Yeah, they were almost like, it reminded me of Hemlock being Frankenstein, and these were his monsters. And that this is, and I almost kind of wonder if there was some sort of cloning from the original Clone Force 99 genetic material that went into actually creating these. And so, of course, at this point, the whole, could this be tech, was kind of still on the table for me, especially with the one that was communicating with Crosshair as he was taking off his arm. Because I thought, who would know better than tech that would be, of dire importance to Crosshair. But I just, they were really, they give you the heebie-jeebies.
Part of me was wondering if we were going to get a reveal that they were clones of Clone Force 99. Because
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that turned out not to be the case. They were clones that were just more susceptible to the training or, the reprogramming methods that Hemlock had in there. But I thought they were pretty cool in there. And I like the idea. It reminded me a bit of the way the finale played out in season 3 of The Mandalorian. Now, because we were like under the threat of these clones of Moff Gideon, which were going to be like the Phase 3 Dark Troopers showing up and wreaking havoc. And of course, Mando wiped them out before they had a chance. But we still had Gideon in the Mark III Dark Trooper armor to wreak havoc on them. So it was a similar story beat there. But getting to see them in action, I was a little surprised. I guess I'm actually, on reflection, I'm not. They took down the Bad Batch so quickly, but they had also fought their way across half the planet. And Wrecker was fairly injured after wrestling that monster in the previous episode as well. So they did have an advantage in numbers to go with it on top of that. But I like to see it. And I really liked the instances of team up that we got from the Bad Batch and the other clones that were around to take them down.
Oh, yeah. That was so great.
Because it is a direct refutation of what Hemlock says to Omega, which is clones have a weakness, and it is that undying loyalty to each other. And it ended up being the strength of why they were able to beat those commandos in the end.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's so poetic. Did we ever find out what does CX stand for? The letters C and X. Is there any kind of a significance to that particular designation?
It's Clone X, and then they're like, I mean, I'm calling them CX clones, but they're actually CX commandos, and the C is clones, the X is just X.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered, because if you turn your head sideways and you look at the C and the X, it kind of looks like a skull and crossbones, which is Clone Force 99.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, especially Wrecker's Home.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm reading too far into that, of course.
Well, especially since it would be like Arabesh and
good point.
the Storm Resumer, so it wouldn't be quite the same symbol. But yeah, so I want to revisit Crosshair losing a hand. And my initial reaction to that was that it was tragic that he was losing, because he's a sharpshooter. But upon reflection, I'm not actually certain that's the case. I mean, if you think about it, every time he thought about what he went through on Tantiss, that hand would begin to shake and would begin to tremble. And it was a reminder. But then once he lost it, he made it out on that platform that Hemlock had Omega on, shot out the 2 engines from Hemlock's ship, and then made the sniper shot to defeat the binders with his other hand. So in a way, I think it kind of freed him from his past.
That's a good way to look at it.
And the torture that he was going through.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. I just looked at it as, I didn't expect that to be the resolution to his tremors, but the way that you put it makes so much more sense. And I agree. Yeah, now that you put it that way, for sure.
What do you think about Emerie in this episode?
I was just happy to see that, my hopes did actually come to fruition. I figured that she would end up being an asset to them. I didn't know how much, but boy, did she turn a complete 180. And she was just all on board and, helping Echo, and you're not going to do this without me. And then, giving Omega the data pad that she was then able to pass on, and just the whole 9 yards, and just being a steward for those children. Although I will say that I was kind of, just a quick aside, a little surprised at the ease at which they flew out of Tantiss. Were you at all? When they got out of there on that shuttle?
Well, no, because one, the Zillo beast had already rampaged through the hangar, and they'd already sent off a number of forces after it. 2, this planet's hidden, so there wasn't like any ships in orbit to prevent them from getting away. And 3, there was turmoil going inside the base. So I did think about that for a second, but then I realized, no, they could probably get away because there's just so much chaos going on right there. Who knows who's on that shuttle, and who's counting on it being the kids that are escaping, of all things.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I loved the bit with Emerie. She's talking to Echo at the end, and she realizes how much she actually has in common with the clones that she was experimenting on. She never had a childhood. She never got to make a choice herself. And then she was doing these things simply because it's the only way that she knew. And so she's got to make up for it. So not only did she take these kids under her wing, but then she was going to Pantora with Echo to help settle in the other clones that they freed,
Yeah.
and to do her part by talking to Senator Chuchi about the plight of the clones.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
yeah, so she really found a path forward, and one heck of a redemption.
Oh, yeah. And, and for her, I feel like she's going to really take that to the ultimate because she's obviously trying to reconcile for all of the time that she spent against the clones. And so I just think she's going to end up being an amazing advocate for them,
Mhm.
especially at Senator Chi-Chi's side.
Yeah, yeah. So I like the way that turned out, and I hope there is storytelling with her in the future
Yes, I want
that
to
will
see that.
include her. I don't know that I need a story focused on her, but that will include her and what's
Mhm.
going on with the clone. I mean, they haven't announced anything as an animation project that'll follow this up. I mean, I'm not counting Tales of the Empire because that's an anthology, one day, 6 episodes release. That's really the length of 3 episodes of the Bad
Mhm.
Batch when it's all said
Mhm.
and done. But I could see some series going forward that takes place in the not too distant future after this, where we got more to do with the clones and she figures into that. So,
Mhm.
but I gotta tell you, an underrated part of this episode is the escape that the kids made with Omega from the vault when Scalder comes down there. And this is
Oh,
right
yeah.
after the kids had distracted the droid and Omega reprograms it. And it just goes in that real lazy circle arc around, comes up behind Scalder while she's like spinning around, like chastising these children, and just boop, injects her from
Poke.
behind and,
Yep.
and knocks her right out. It's just like, it was like the slowest car crash ever. But
Yeah.
I thought that was such a fun moment.
Oh, absolutely. And the kids all from the beginning were a little skeptical on how this was going to go and this sounds so dangerous and Omega just took right over and they're like, "How do you know how to do that? And can you really do that?" And Omega was just very confident of her abilities and proved it as such. And she really did serve as a great leader to the kids too, because even when they were getting ready to climb up and out the same way that the Zillo Beast went, and Jax was saying, "Yeah, I'm afraid of heights," and Omega was saying, "Well, you know what? One of my brothers is afraid of heights too, and he is the strongest soldier that I know. So just keep focusing on what's ahead and don't look behind." I just thought that was so great.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Loved
I
that part.
yeah, I really loved the gratitude for the kids, for one for Emerie and then two for Omega, as she's taking them away, they just that group hug. And, I think that caught Omega by surprise a little bit. She's a very empathic person, but I don't think she knew she gave those kids hope. I don't think she quite grasped how much hope she gave them.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah. Really, the last thing I think there is, the last big thing there is to talk about in this episode is the epilogue scene where, it's dark, it's the beach on Pabu, and we see this figure wandering in, along the beach, looking up at the city and then into the cave, turns on some lights, and then we get the reveal that it is a grown-up Omega there. How quickly did you catch on that was her?
Oh, right
Before,
away.
yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't think it was too much of a surprise either. And she's made this decision. She's gonna go help the rebellion. And Hunter's the parent waiting up for a child, knows the kid all too well, and so thought you could get away without saying goodbye, or whatever, something along those lines. And they have that heart to heart where she tells Hunter's like, "You all done your part, you fought, you deserve to rest, but I can still offer more. I've made my choice and I'm ready for this." To which his response is, "Yeah, I know, but I'm not."
Mhm.
And that kicked me right in the gut, because he also says, she says, "I'm not a kid anymore," and he says, "Yeah, but you're our kid."
Yeah.
And just the parental feels that came with all that. I mean, you've done this. You sent 2 kids off to school, and on their own, you're an empty nester at this point. I've sent
Mhm.
a son off to college, and it is not easy. They're ready, but you're not ready to let them go. But you got to let them spread their wings and fly.
It's
And
so
he
true.
does. I mean, he doesn't try to talk her out of it. And Omega knows exactly what to say to him.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was just the perfect epilogue.
Oh, it really was. And, and again, as you said, I picked up on that right away. I was really happy to see Batcher still around too. And so those Lucra hounds must have a pretty long lifespan,
Hmm.
for dogs. But and then to see Hunter with his gray hair, because of course, the clones have their growth acceleration, so they do age faster than not accelerated clones, and obviously Omega is not an accelerated clone, but she's beautiful. I will say though, I love seeing Gonki, number one. So
Yeah.
glad to see Gonki. But I was kind of hoping for, in some ways, like, well, where's Crosshair and Wrecker, to see her off? Where are they? Because they were obviously on Pabu as well. But then again, it was kind of fitting because with Omega and Hunter, they were the first two that truly bonded.
Hmm.
And it was always kind of Hunter being not just an uncle to Omega, but like you said, a parent.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that hit me right in the feels. And then when Omega adjusts Tech's goggles on her
Hmm.
like dashboard, oh my gosh, that's when the waterworks started. Was that just this whole area, this whole thing. And then she says she's going off to the rebellion. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, kind of like, when we realized that the ghost was in The Rise of Skywalker,
Hmm.
like, has Omega been with us this whole time?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And I think that yes, she has been. And
Yeah.
that's so
We
exciting to think about.
had no reason to know who she was or where she was, or if she
Right.
showed up anywhere. But yeah, she's been with Rebellion. We don't know what her fate is. We don't know what her destiny is when it comes to that, and that
Yeah.
would be a story worth exploring at some point. Um, yeah, just to touch on a few other things you said there. Yeah, Wrecker and Hunter weren't there, but I think you're right. Or Wrecker and Crosshair weren't there. This needed to be Hunter in Omega's moment, because even though I feel like Hunter he was the least unique amongst the Bad Batch, because he had those enhanced like tracking sentences and awareness, which is what his ability was. But that didn't play on screen as well as Tech's abilities with electronics and Echo's ability to slice into things, and his soldier techniques, and Wrecker being gigantic, strong, and blowing things up, and Crosshair's marksmanship. But so Hunter was kind of a character you could reflect a lot of things. He's kind of a mirror you could reflect a lot of things on, and he was the stoic center of that group there.
Mhm.
Earlier in the episode when Crosshair is saying, Omega's going to need you two, he's like, no, Omega's going to need all three of us. And,
Yeah.
and so I think it was fitting there that he would be in tune to know that this was something she was going to pull. And so he took that moment, and it was going to be easier for him than to explain it to Crosshair and Wrecker. Rucker would, like, you go get him, kid, is probably what his response would have
Yes.
been. And, and that type of thing. So no, I like that. I thought it was, and it probably would have been too much if all three of them were there. It wouldn't have been quite as poetic, I think. I mean, it would have been a little bit more heartfelt, but it would have been a larger scene. This was smaller and more intimate. And
Mhm.
I think it played out really well.
No, I agree. I think it was very fitting. All I could think of was like three men and a little lady, kind of a
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
That's good. That's a good comparison. I hadn't thought of that.
But did you notice though that when they freed Omega from Hemlock and she starts running towards them, she pauses
Mhm.
on that bridge, and then the first person that she embraces is Crosshair.
Yeah.
That
I,
broke me too, I have to say.
yeah, I was going to bring that up as something else, was that standoff on the bridge. And I think Crosshair needed it the most, when it came down to,
Mhm.
because he came back to the site of his torture and made it through, and he made the shot that
Yeah.
he wasn't able to make just
Mhm.
recently. And Omega knew that. And so he faced down that fear, he faced down that trauma, and came out on top of it. But speaking of that bridge, that that scene was perfect when it
Oh, yeah.
came down to it, because Hemlock is out of options. He's got a gun to Omega's head, and he tells her they won't risk hurting you. And she's like, and neither will you. You need me.
Mhm.
And then, she pulls out her tool and uses a stab in the leg. And then, Crosshair makes that shot. And then they just fill him full of shots there. No stuns. They shot to kill on that one. And he deserved it. I mean, he deserved every single bit of that.
Oh, 100%. And I have to say too that whole scene was very Camino-esque
Mm-hmm.
because the whole catwalk and the bridge
Mm-hmm.
and everything with the rain and all of that, it was almost as if it was sort of a full circle moment, very fitting that this is the way that the sons of Camino should be able to get their vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I am very salty about how Scorch died. I do not like the way that they just pawned him off like that. And if nothing else, I would just have rather not known his fate. Just because I'm a big, Republic Commando fan.
Yeah, I think
So
you have
I
to
was
look
just
at it
like,
as not
ugh.
the same Scorch. It's an
I know, but still
inspiration, but it's not that guy.
true, but it's still, yeah, I don't know.
I
I was
mean,
just not happy with that.
he wasn't exactly a hero here in the
No,
Bad Batch.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. But the rest of that scene was mwah, chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that covers most of the episode pretty much. Any last details you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
Well, one thing you have right at the very beginning of our notes, which was right at the very beginning of the show, was just the fact that the title card and the
Mm-hmm.
music and the whole like the Lucasfilm logo, and even normally when you have the introduction with the Star Wars, da, 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 and you have the
Mm-hmm.
diddle, 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 it was all just black and silver and
Yeah.
very somber, and just like their armor that had been scrubbed. And so I was like, oh, from the beginning, like, oh no, this is not going to be good. So I think they did a great job in just setting up the whole tone of this just from the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. That title card was like huge. I mean, it was way
Yeah.
bigger than it usually is. But yeah, this last 4 episodes of the Bad Batch really reminds me of the final arc of season 7 of the Clone Wars.
Mm.
Uh, the way
Mhm.
they put everything together, and I wouldn't be too surprised if at like Celebration Japan or something like that, they showed them kind of like a movie the way they did at Celebration in Anaheim for season 7 of
Ooh,
the Clone Wars. So
yeah. It'd
that'd
be
be something
great
to
if they
see.
would release this even as a limited edition kind of a thing in just local theaters. I'd go see it.
Yeah, I would too. I don't know. You and I are diehards. We'd definitely go do something like that. I just don't know if they could make enough money doing it, especially since people just watch all these 4 episodes right now on Disney Plus. But
Mhm.
it'd be fun. So
Mhm.
all right. Well, that's it. That's it for the Bad Batch. That was fantastic. A really good series from start to finish. Some parallels to Clone Wars. Omega went from being annoying to endearing over the course of 3 seasons, and uh, you know, we grew kind of along with her and developed a fondness for her and this entire group. So hats off to Dave Filoni, Jennifer Corbett, Brad Rao. They all did a fantastic job on this show. So I'm going to miss it. I can't wait to see what comes next in the world of Star Wars animation.
Oh, same here. And just D. Bradley Baker, we got to give him props for just holding down the fort, literally, of all of these voices, including even Batcher, which I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize until I watched the credits. So just amazing talent. And it's just the end of an era. And I'm sure it was very bittersweet for all of them as well. I know I saw some things on Instagram, some reels of just recalling the final script readings and whatnot, and that was just really it was hard to watch, but it was also bittersweet, just in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of wrap up articles on StarWars.com right now. You can go read with messages from the cast and crew. So go check
Mhm.
those out.
Mhm.
Okay, well then, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the series finale of The Bad Batch. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please consider subscribing to Podcast Stardust on your podcatcher of choice, and you'll get our discussion of whatever comes next in the world of Star Wars animation. We know we got Tales from the Empire coming up, and we'll be covering those over the next couple weeks. And I can't imagine this is it for Star Wars animation series. So whatever comes next, we'll be there to cover it.
Mhm.
I'd like to remind you that you can find all episodes of the show over on retrozap.com, which is home to the entire network of shows covering everything from retro culture, superheroes, Dune, Star Trek, and a whole lot more. And as always, we greatly appreciate your support with 5-star ratings and reviews and whatever podcatcher that you use to do such things. And we love it when you share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. So with that in mind, Jay will remind everybody what our contacts are one more time.
Absolutely. We can be very easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we do have some Pinterest boards and both of our YouTube channels, the regular YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So hit us up on both of those, like and subscribe. And you can also interact with us over there as well. And speaking of interaction, you can also hit us up for some real time chatter on our Discord room. So the link for that will also be in our show notes, as will the link to our TeePublic store, where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs for Podcast Stardust on everything from tote bags, apparel, and home goods, and everything in between. And then we also have our referral for Saber Masters. So if you need a new lightsaber, you can head over to sabermasters.com and you can check out one of lots of different types of lightsabers that they have over there. And they still have their 2-for-1 deal going on the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0. And so if you do head over there, make sure that you put in the code STARDUST at checkout and you'll receive an extra $10 off. And that also helps to support the show. So if you would like to do that, just once again, hit us up in the show notes, or you can go to sabermasters.com. So with that, Dennis, why don't you fill everybody in on what you got going on with Warp Trails?
Right. Warp Trails is the podcast devoted to Star Trek, hosted by myself and my wife, Beth. We are currently covering season 5 of Discovery, which is its final season. And you can find that on the Retrozap podcast feed, which is pretty much on every podcast player that's out there. Or you can just head over to retrozap.com and you can find our entire catalog of shows. Jay, what is up with cosplay?
Well, as we all know, tomorrow is our holiday. So May the 4th be with everybody. And May the 4th, I will be at 2 different events. So I will be at Common Grounds in Medina, Ohio from 12 to 2 p.m. doing a make and take keychain little event. And then I'm also emceeing for the 3rd year in a row a Star Wars trivia night at the Grigio Wine and Cocktail Bar in Worcester, Ohio from 7 to 9 p.m. So I got both of those things going on. And then you can also check me out on my Instagram at j.snipscosplay for all of my cosplay adventures, and definitely giving a lot of love to Fourth Sister, as we are going to be seeing her in Tales of the Empire, and I'm so excited. So once again, that is at j.snipscosplay.
Okay, so upcoming on the show on Monday, we'll have some Star Wars news to share with y'all. It's going to be a light week, I can tell you already, but we'll be discussing what is there. And then on Wednesday, we're going back a few years with a look at Darth Vader number 18 from Charles Soule's run. This issue is called Bad Ground, and pick this one out for a reason, because it's a really good story, and I can't wait to discuss it here with Jay. So make sure you join us for that. But thanks for listening to episode 724 Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. May the 4th be with you. And until next time, may the 4th be with you.